On this episode of Big Sky Now, we discuss our takeaways from Week 0. We also discuss our personal favorite FCS, FBS matchups in history. And then we deep dive into Week 1, followed by our weekly picks. Before we start, I want to give a special thank you to M&C Tires for sponsoring this podcast. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. I am Luke Schmidt, your host of the Big Sky Now podcast. I am very thrilled to be joined by Daily Interlake sports editor Fritz Neighbor, Daily Interlake sports reporter Sean Allen, Coeur d'Alene sports editor Mark Nelke, and Columbia Basin Herald sports reporter Mike Maynard. Let's not waste any time and get right into it, guys. Week 0 came and went this last weekend, and we had 3 Big Sky games to jump into. The first one, let's talk about a game saw over 1,000 yards of offense. Idaho State came up just short after kicking off their season at UNLV Saturday. The Rebels escaped with a 38-31 victory, but let me ask you, Fritz, what are some positives, especially offensively, that you saw from the Bengals?
Well, I've liked the way their offense has been run for the last couple of years since their coach came on board, and then Saturday, Jordan Cook threw for 380 when I think he had 3 interceptions, but still he was in there until the end. I think they got the ball back down 7, and they wound up outgaining UNLV 555 to 539, and that's thanks to a 34-yard pass he completed from his own 4 to get them one final first down before they gave the ball up on downs. I don't know if you guys recall a couple weeks ago, I just decided the Bengals are my dark horse to do something in the Big Sky, and I'm kind of encouraged. I know UNLV is not what you would call a mid-major power, but I thought I just like the way the Bengals, got up and down the field. They got 132 rushing yards from Jason Brooks, and they got 105 yards from one of the receivers, Duarte, and I think they're going to be a handful for a lot of Big Sky teams.
I'm right with you, Fritz. John, we watched this game closely together on Saturday. What was your take?
Yeah, I'm definitely with Fritz. I like what I saw offensively from the Bengals. I don't know how much of this was Idaho State, advancing from last year, and how much of it was UNLV trying to learn under Dan Mullen, because that was his first game as head coach there as well. But the 3 interceptions is less than stellar. 30 for 50 passing, he give some, take some kind of deal there. But 7 yards per play, one thing that I saw, and that doing that against an FBS program is always going to be great for an FCS team. The penalties were one thing that I did not like. 10 penalties for 80 yards. I think this game had 180 penalty yards in total between the two teams. And just Idaho State's defense just kind of worries me that it's business like it was last year. They gave up 251 yards per game on the ground last year. They gave up 301. Jaden Thomas had 3 touchdowns in this game. So, it's one of the things where the offense might be rolling pretty well, but is the defense going to step up and make that next step this year? And what I saw on Saturday, albeit, a tough opponent, I still have questions on that.
Definitely, John. Mark, where do you stand with the great offensive success they had, but possibly some defensive woes? And like John was saying last year, having some similar traits.
Yeah, sounds like we've heard this before. So I know Idaho State came in, they were optimistic coming into the season anyway, based on last year's success, which for them, anything is success for them compared to what they have been. So it's probably part encouraging, part frustrating, because they threw a couple picks late when they could have won the game, which would have been a nice signature win at a FBS school, even though it's UNLV. I mean, UNLV thinks they're as good as Boise State, if not better, and they're not. But good luck to that. So they're just as capable of maybe letting a team like ISU play with them a little bit too. So I'm kind of like what John said. ISU's defense was a little bit troubling, because that's something that was a problem last year, and they thought they were going to address it. And maybe it's hard to tell against an FBS school, but anyway, their defense does have to play better, if they want to, make that next step in the Big Sky.
Yeah, and Mike, this was kind of your first maybe exciting FCS FBS game. What were your takeaways? I'll let you finish this game up, and we'll go ahead.
I know, what a way to get introduced to the conference. That was a really fun game. I remember watching like right at the beginning, Alex Orji with that fumble in the end zone, and um, yeah, I think Idaho State offensively. I know Fritz mentioned the 3 interceptions, but it didn't seem to really shake them. They kept coming and fighting, and it was a fun game to watch. And I think to do that against a Dan Mullen led team. I know it was his first game, but former SEC coach. I mean, the resume, he has a pretty strong resume, so no easy opponent whatsoever, and they hung with him. So there's something to be said. I'm interested to see how um, their productivity translates to when they start playing in the conference and how they match up with the rest of the league.
Yeah, well said, Mike. Sum this one up. I'm excited to see what Idaho State's offense can achieve this season after this game. Can Jordan Cook continue his success in the air? Like Fritz said, 380-yard passing day. Deshaun Brooks rushed for 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. The receivers had success. So overall, yeah, great start for Idaho State Bengals. And we'll see if that defense is looking the same with these Big Sky opponents. Let's jump over to the next game. The tables were turned in this game as we saw Portland State was defeated 42-0 as Tarleton State came into town, and it was over early as Trey Page III opened the gates for the Texans, and they never looked back. Fritz, how concerned, should Portland State fans be after this game?
Well, the couple handfuls of Portland State fans that we have should be really concerned. I know Tarleton State's ranked 10th, I believe, so they were good. That was a tough first opponent. But man, they kind of got the brakes beaten off them. They threw 3 interceptions. They gave up 301 rushing yards. They outgained 453 to 277. They got a quarterback who's straight out of office space. Sagapalut, not going to work here anymore. That guy. I did notice that Therese Smith came in and he was a dual threat for him. Maybe that's their guy. He ran 10 times and 3-4 passes, and maybe Portland State needs to shorten the games a little bit and have a dual threat guy come out there and move him down the field that way. But yeah, that's a tough one to open the season. Portland State hasn't been a player in the Big Sky Conference for a pretty long time. I think they've had one really good season under their current head coach, who's a very likable guy, and I think he's a good coach, but he needs to find some players.
Yes, he does. And John, we watched this one as well. We saw them get some momentum, and then those turnovers off the deflections were just drive killers. Where can you see some improvement for the Vikings this season?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't fully disappointed with how they played in the first half. It looked like they did a pretty good job of trying to limit Tarleton when they could. Throwing 3 interceptions is always going to derail your day. One of them going for a pick 6 in the second half, but it just kind of felt like the team, maybe it was the heat. I know they said it was like 97 degrees there in Portland, so maybe a little unseasonable weather, but it's week 1 and you need to play the full 60 minutes. And in that second half, they gave up, 5. They had 5 possessions. Tarleton State, they gave up 3 touchdowns. Tarleton State missed a field goal, and the 5th possession was kneel downs. So, that's not a great sign for how a game weathers on throughout the day. But like Fritz mentioned, they gave up 301 yards defensively. Tarleton's able to, put the offense together. And then on the offensive side, when you're running heavy, like Portland State needed to be in that game, then they started to air the ball out when they get behind, and you just kind of compound your mistakes with turnovers there. So there's a lot that needs to be worked on both offensively and defensively. Right now, it just kind of seems like they're one-dimensional with trying to run the ball. I like what Fritz mentioned too, with a dual threat active action and trying to slow down the game. That's the way you keep yourself in there, is to limit possessions.
Well said, John. And Mark, I just want to get your takeaway as well. Does this game kind of signify Portland State maybe having just another bottom barrel year at the Big Sky, or what did you think?
I think in recent years, this is kind of what Portland State does. They sometimes they'll play a team really close that's quote unquote better than them. And then sometimes they'll have a game like this where they just get, outmatched and stuff like that. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. If it happens another few weeks, then maybe we do. I think it was Fritz or John mentioned the 97 degrees in Portland. I mean, I grew up in Oregon, and 97 degrees in Portland is like maybe 107 here in Idaho and maybe 117 in Montana. So it's kind of, that's pretty hot for Portland. So I don't know. I mean, Tarleton's probably a little more used to the heat than Portland is. So that could have played a factor, but maybe just a minor factor.
Yeah, definitely a hot one. The commentators in the game kept bringing it up, almost stopped the game because of it. I'll let Mike wrap this one up. This was your first Big Sky smacking, Mike, that we saw. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, the first statistical contrast that I see is, total team yards of 300 rush yards for Tarleton State and 108 for Portland. It's, you got to be able to stop the run. For a lot of teams, talk to most coaches, if they feel like if they're running the ball well, then everything else kind of opens up for them. And clearly they couldn't do that very well. And I think, it'll just be interesting to see how they adjust over the next few weeks. But maybe the focus is ought to be on just, where can we get better? What do we need to focus on to get better? And kind of go from there.
Yeah, no, you guys definitely covered it. Not much to take away from me here. Like we said, Vikings only had 169 yards passing while trailing all game, so big red flag there. But yeah, I think the Vikings can flush that game and move on, see what they can do, as you just said, Mike, next couple weeks. All right, last game from this week actually did not finish. UC Davis at Mercer was a no contest due to lightning, but it was an interesting game as we saw UC Davis come out strong, and Mercer started coming back. It's got some clutch stops, and ultimately the game stopped, unfortunately, and I think that was going to be a great ending. Fritz, let's hear what you thought.
Well, my main thought is that, I have two thoughts. One, it's too bad the game didn't finish because it seemed like it was going to be a tight one at the end, a really developing into a great finish. And the other thing is, I don't know if you guys saw Caden Pinnick on his touchdown run, but it was ridiculous. It was really impressive. Thought he was bottled a couple different times, and he scores. And it seems like they're pretty well set at QB once again, and at a school that has kind of been quarterback U for Division II, and then at the FCS level. So I think Davis is for real. I really like what Pinnick did too.
John, were you concerned about UC Davis giving up that lead before the game was called off, or do you think that was, something they shouldn't worry about? Is just Mercer starting to find momentum?
I mean, it always is going to bring up a question in there, but I think that this was just two good teams, and one of them made halftime adjustments to come out and try to even the game back up. Mercer was backs against the wall when they went into halftime, and they came out and showed their resolve there in that second half. I kind of wanted to jump on what Fritz was saying with Pinnick. That touchdown run just kind of reminded me, his pocket avoidance there kind of reminded me of Johnny Manziel when he was at Texas A&M with some of those plays. So it was great in being able to move. His accuracy also in that first half was really well. Also, he was 9 of 9 to start the game from what I saw, 80 yards. They got out ahead. So it definitely lasts some questions. How are you going to be able to play with the lead? But for a first showing from a redshirt freshman at quarterback, I think the Aggies have to be a little bit happy about that.
Yeah, that run was impressive. And like Fritz and both you were saying, having a quarterback for them is huge behind that defense. Mark, were you able to watch this game?
I saw a little bit of it. I actually saw the replay late Saturday night when I got home. So, but the first thing I wanted to bring up, if the stats from this game don't count, does this part of the podcast not count either? Is it going to be declared a no contest, and is it going to be stricken from the record? And so this will be a big gap when people come and watch this thing in the future. I think that's kind of silly. Why wouldn't you count the stats? I mean, they played the game. What does it hurt? Second thing you guys talked about Pinnick. The questions they had coming in is how they're going to replace Hastings. He threw 38 touchdown passes, and Lan Larison, who ran for 17 and did everything else. And they seemed to answer those with, Pinnock doing what he did with a touchdown run and a touchdown pass. And then their running back runs for 84 yards and blocks a punt. How many, starting running backs are also coming off the edge and blocking punts? So maybe they got that figured out, and UC Davis can go back. Oh, I just saw Rex Connors just made another tackle. So the other thing, UC Davis, the parts I saw, they looked like they were in command most of the way. They missed a couple field goals that would have put it away, and so I didn't really see much of the end. I saw Mercer scored on a big play, and that got him close. I didn't see the other touchdown, but it looked like UC Davis had the game pretty well in hand, and so it's too bad it kind of looked like a little closer game than it was at the end.
It is too bad. And Mike, I'll let you finish this. Do you think we should let the stats count, or what was your interpretation of the game?
Yeah, I agree. The stats should absolutely count because, up until that point, no matter what team you root for, those guys were working hard, and they earned every yard, every block punt, every touchdown that they got in that game up until that point, and it was a highly competitive game. Clearly, with just over 7 minutes left, one score lead, like that game could have went any direction. It's okay if the final score doesn't count, but at least the stats should. That's kind of to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, I'm with you guys. Wish we could have watched that one end, but we'll see what both teams can do going forward. Maybe they'll meet up in the playoffs again. I think both teams showed they are going to be a strong force in the FCS. So to wrap up this Week 0 talk, I want to hear some of your guys' personal favorite games that have happened between FBS and FCS schools throughout history. Fritz, I know you have a few to name, so let's hear it.
Well, the first one that kind of comes to my mind is App State beating Michigan, whatever year that was, 07, I think.
Yep.
07.
Anyway, but the Grizz broke through and beat the Huskies in 2021 at Husky Stadium. That was a big one because it's been kind of a long time since Montana had been able to go up a level and even compete, much less win. But that's not my favorite. My favorite is a game they lost in 93. They went to Oregon. I think Oregon was really starting to get on the upswing, getting some of that Nike money working for them. And the Grizz came in and fell behind 20-3, and they put in this guy named Dave Dickinson, and Oregon survived 35-30, and they couldn't tackle him, and they couldn't stop him from completing passes. And he kind of announced his arrival then, even though I think they had to have that one more comeback win with him coming off the bench against South Dakota State later that year before they said, okay, here's our starter. So Oregon fans say, remember when that backup almost beat us in 1993? That backup's now in the College Football Hall of Fame, and so that's probably my favorite one through the years.
Definitely a great one. And John, I'll jump to you. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were both attending Montana when they defeated Washington over there. Take me through maybe what you were doing or what your reaction was, and then any other games you had to recall.
Yeah, well, I remember because it was on Pac-12 Network was the broadcast for that, and Pac-12 Network was not easily available. So I was kind of making my runs around. I think I ended up at the press box that night in Missoula to take it in, and then something happened and they weren't able to, and they gave us the login information to the press boxes like Pac-12 Network, and just watched it at my house. So that was interesting, but that was definitely one of the games that I'll always remember, just, being a Montana graduate and taking down a ranked Washington team. That is just kind of a great moment that'll live in my mind. Another one though that I kind of want to remember is before I went to college, when I was in high school, the Eastern Washington Eagles going over to Corvallis, Oregon, and knocking off a ranked Oregon State team. Vernon Adams throwing for 400 plus yards, 4 touchdowns. He ran for another 2 touchdowns and 100 yards. Ashton Clark had 9 catches for the Eagles there, and Cooper Kupp on that team as well with 5 catches and 2 touchdowns. So, and this Oregon State team wasn't a bunch of slouches. Sean Mannion in the backfield for the Bees with 422, and Brandon Cooks, Saints wide receiver with 200 receiving yards for the Beavs as well. So that was a great back and forth game that I kind of always remember when it comes down to a ranked FBS team and an FCS opponent.
Yeah, and I think that Oregon State team was, if I believe, ranked top 25, or they maybe 25th. So, like you said, they're no joke. Mark, go ahead. What were some games that you remember?
Yeah, I was trying to think of some Idaho ones at first, and most of their more memorable ones were close losses, which is kind of when they beat WSU the last two times in 98, 99, they'd already moved up to FBS. So I had to go back to 1984 when Idaho beat Oregon State 41-22 at the Kibbe Dome, which you think about Oregon State coming to the Kibbe Dome to play a game. Yeah. That's how long ago that was. I can't remember if Dee Andrews might still have been the coach then or not. I don't know if you remember that, Fritz, or
I don't.
That's the other ones. I mean, were just kind of close calls. Idaho beat Nevada a couple years ago. Obviously, the Oregon game last year, where they were in that game for a while, for most of the game. And then they beat Wyoming. So, but there isn't anything like John mentioned the Eastern game. They had I wrote down 3 of their games, and one of them was the Oregon State game, 49-46 in 2013, Cooper Kupp and Vernon Adams and stuff like that. 2014 was a loss to the Huskies, 59-52 over in Seattle, which scared the heck out of the Huskies. And some guy named Kupp had 3 touchdown catches in that game. And then let's see, 2016 Eastern beat WSU 45-42 in Pullman. Some guy named Kupp. I mean, maybe he had something to do with that little run for them. He might have been pretty good in college. Anyway, maybe 12 for 206, 3 touchdowns, and Gage Gubrud with 474 yards and 5 touchdowns. So that was kind of more the ones I more remember Eastern during that string, knocking off some bigger teams.
No, that's great, Mark. That's great. And Mike, what about you? What did you have to look up some, or were you able to actually watch some of these games growing up? Do you remember any?
I don't have a great memory, but as an Ohio native, I will never pass up the opportunity to talk a little smack about that team up north, losing to App State. Always good to reminisce. Yeah, I always enjoy watching that one.
That's great. That's great memory, I'm sure. You guys covered a couple of the ones I definitely remember: Montana versus Washington and Eastern Washington. But I think the one I remember specifically in high school was watching Easton Stick and North Dakota State take down 13th ranked Iowa. That was one that I definitely remember. I had it on for some reason. Probably Dad turned on a perfect day for football. So no, all those games. Definitely interesting, and who can forget App State? I mean, that's probably the most famous one throughout history. But that should wrap up our talk of Week 0 and some legendary upsets in the past. Let's look forward now to next week's games. We have a full slate of games. Week 1, very excited. I know we are all excited to see what noise this conference can make. So since there's 11 games in total, I know we could talk hours and forever about each matchup, but let's talk with some bigger anticipated games in the conference this week. Fritz, what excites you? What Big Sky games are you keeping a close eye on this week?
Well, there's a handful that I'm really kind of wondering about. Eastern Washington going down to Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word doesn't seem like nearly the power that they have been based on how they did the first week. Weber State has to go over to James Madison, which, is going up a level. Maybe we'll be talking about them next week. And the Cats start at Oregon. That should be an interesting game too. The biggest one I'm wondering about, maybe besides the Cats, is Sac State going to South Dakota State, because South Dakota State's still really good. And Sac State I just find it funny that they're picked 6th in the Big Sky, and then the preseason FCS poll comes out and they're number 15. So what do they know? The coaches don't. Sac State's I think they're going to start a quarterback, a holdover, Cardell Williams, but they got this true freshman, Jamar Malone, who's just played really well in their scrimmages. And lest we forget that Lafayette transfer, Jamar Curtis, is the reigning Patriot League Offensive Player of the Year. So I think Sac State's pretty loaded. I think they probably have an extra grind and a lot to prove. That's the one I'm really interested to see how it goes.
John, go ahead. The floor is yours. What are you anticipating? Is there one of the matchups maybe some people aren't thinking about that could go differently?
Well, I'll mention one here at the end that a lot of people won't have on their radar at all, but I do for a specific reason. But I feel like honestly half this slate this week excites me just because of the questions that'll be answered and what we've seen even in week 0 with like Incarnate Word, as Fritz mentioned, going taking on Eastern. They didn't play very good in their loss to Nichols. So will the Eagles be able to go out there and put in a good performance as well? Montana State and Oregon. I'm a bit of a Ducks fan, so I'm always excited to watch the Ducks play, and that'll answer a lot of questions for both teams in that one, because I feel like the quarterback question, who's going to be playing for Montana State. I know they released their 2 deep today. I believe I saw that earlier. Yeah, Lamson.
The Stanford guy is going to be their quarterback. Yeah,
and Duchesne is the number 2 on that list. So, yeah, Sac State and South Dakota State, of course, that interests me because we've been talking about the Hornets all summer. Fritz mentioned James Madison and Weber State out on the East Coast. That's also going to be a good one because James Madison not too long ago was an FCS program. So there's definitely some bad blood with some of these teams that could still be there. The Battle of the Palouse, you got Idaho and Washington State. I'm sure Mark will talk about that one coming up a little bit as well. The one that most people aren't going to see is kind of a sicko game, but I used to work in central Nebraska, so I'm a bit interested to see how Chadron State plays at Northern Colorado. So I think that might be a surprisingly good game. So that's kind of the ones that I'll have my TV tuned into.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, last week I was able to have an interview. If you guys haven't checked that out, it's on our YouTube channel. Had an interview with Northern Colorado's offensive coordinator and QB1, and I think they're excited to finally have a year under their belt of experience, and should be interesting to see how they come out. Mark, let's hear your thoughts on those Idaho and Idaho State games coming up on Saturday, and any other games. Feel free to tell us.
Now, first of all, John, I'm with you. I'm surprised that Chadron State Northern Colorado game didn't get bumped up to one of the ESPN networks, but maybe they're a little busy this week. But anyway, Idaho WSU is kind of an interesting one again. I mean, they played 3 years ago. It was Jason Eck's first year. Nobody really knew what Idaho had, and they played WSU really well. Jake Dickert was in his first full year, and it's one of those things. WSU has, they're an FBS program. They should have better players. Doesn't mean Idaho can't beat them. And Idaho played well against them last time, almost beat them, and WSU did what it needed to get the win. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. WSU is a little different now. They're kind of WSU / South Dakota State. So we'll see how that goes. And Idaho has a lot of new faces, but I think there's still going to be pretty good. So, like I said, pretty curious to see how that plays out. Idaho State at Southern Utah. I mean, Idaho State, sometimes they're kind of not like Portland State, where sometimes they'll play really well one week and stink it up the next. And so this will be an interesting game to see if Idaho State can put another good effort together, because Southern Utah's, they're good, 7-5 last year. So, and then Eastern and Incarnate Word, like Fritz mentioned, Incarnate Word lost last week. Eastern's been down. Here's a chance for Eastern maybe to go in and kick them when they're down again, when Incarnate Word's down coming off a loss. So we'll kind of learn a lot about Eastern too. So those are the ones I'm kind of looking at in particular in our area.
Mike, I'm eager to hear what storylines or games you find fascinating, and if you also want to dive into your neck of the woods with Eastern Washington game, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll save Eastern Washington just for a moment here, but I think one that easily came to mind was Sacramento State and South Dakota State. One of the things I've learned very quickly is South Dakota State is a heck of a program. And then also, I know Sacramento State has made headlines here and there about their activity in the transfer portal. So I feel like this week kind of starts the beginning of them answering a question. Well, was those moves worth it? Did they make the right moves? Was it worth bringing in those guys? It'll feed that conversation around NIL, which will be fun to watch. So I feel like that'll be actually a really good game. Hopefully, I can tune into that. And then, yeah, Idaho. I remember they kind of gave Oregon a tough time last year, and here's another opportunity to give another FBS level team some heck. Yeah, so I'll be interested to see that one. And then yeah, Eastern Washington, I think they're in a very unique position where they can try to capitalize on the moment of Incarnate Ward dropping that first game, and dropping it in kind of spectacular fashion. They kind of 20-6, kind of wasn't a close loss. So I think for the Eagles, this is an opportunity to kind of take the moment and you know see what can happen. Saw that in their last scrimmage. Looks like Jake Shakel got some reps at quarterback as well. Looked pretty good, 9 for 14, 64% completion percentage. But I think I still expect Jared Taylor probably to be the starter. But we'll see how that plays out this weekend.
Yeah, well said, Mike. I'll give my quick 2 cents here. I'll try and make it fast. Obviously, I think Oregon and Montana State game is obviously the big headliner for the Big Sky this week. I hope to see MSU make that one competitive, as well as seeing how their offense is structured with such a tough opponent. And I thought it was interesting, Stanford transfer with Lamson being named the starter. He's already played against Oregon before. So I think seeing him go back, see how he handles that situation. As you both all of you talked about, Sac State and South Dakota State, definitely have my eyes on that one for sure. I love watching to see how South Dakota State usually looks the first couple weeks of the season. And James Madison with Weber, as we said, traveling across the country. BYU should handle Portland State after what I saw this last weekend. I'm interested to see BYU true freshman Bear Bachmeier starting quarterback. It's going to be wearing number 47. So that's not something you see every day. So I might have to tune in for a couple drives here and there on that. Northern Arizona has me intrigued with Arizona State because of preseason all-conference quarterback Ty Pettington at the helm. Makes me curious if we see him give the Sun Devils some early problems in the game, maybe raise some eyebrows there. And as we talked about, Incarnate Ward was upset last week to Nicholas. I think obviously we could see them coming for redemption, being really pissed after a loss, or we'll see how they handle the adversity. And Eastern Washington might be able to sneak with the win there, just like Mike said. Idaho State had a strong showing last week. They should take care of business. We could talk more about our picks soon. The game I'm most excited to watch is the Battle of the Palouse, where Idaho travels less than 8 miles across the border, face Washington State under the lights on Saturday. Quarterback John Mateer and a slew of players followed Cougar coach Jake Dickert, to Wake Forest, but Washington State hired previous South Dakota State Jimmy Rogers, and he's bringing an armada of his previous players with him. So I could see this game being closer than some think, with some adjustments from previous FCS players and a new quarterback for the Cougars. So I'll give my pick shortly on that one, but week 1 should have some fireworks, and very excited to watch it all. But enough of my rambling. Let's wrap up the show, guys. It's a favorite segment they've done here in the past, and I'm excited to start. Let's do our picks of the week. So, Fritz, let's hear your selections on the games.
Okay, pressure's on. I'm the defending champ. So it's awfully tempting to pick Chadron over UNC because UNC has been down so long, but Chadron only won 3 games last year, and unless they bring back Danny Woodhead, I don't think they'll win Saturday. So I'll pick UNC to beat Chadron. I'll pick Oregon over Montana State, James Madison over Weber, Eastern over Incarnate Word. I'm going to take SDSU over Sac State. I'll take Cal Poly over San Diego. I'm going to take my Bengals, Idaho State over Southern Utah. I know Southern Utah was 7-5 last year, but Cargie Lamston, their stud running back, is no longer there. He graduated. So ASU, my Sun Devils, I'll pick them over NEU, but I think NEU will give them a game. And then I'll take Wazoo over Idaho and Davis over Utah Tech. And then the last one is BYU in Portland.
Yes. Yes.
I'll take BYU. I didn't think that was it this week. So, okay. That's it. I'm out of breath.
Perfect. John, go ahead.
Yeah, well, first off, got to mention Danny Woodhead, pride of North Platte, Nebraska. That's where I used to work. So, record holder there at North Platte High School. But yeah, I'll go ahead and start off with I think Oregon takes down Montana State. I got Northern Colorado over Chadron as well, but I will be watching James Madison over Weber State. I've got Incarnate Word over Eastern. I do find it interesting to see how the Eagles come out and play though in that game, and just how Incarnate Word tries to rebound. I also have South Dakota State over Sacramento State, BYU over Portland State. I've got Southern Utah over Idaho State. I just feel like the Thunderbirds, coming off of a almost playoff appearance last year, they level it back up and get their first taste again of Big Sky football coming back in 2026, right? So Arizona State over NAU, Washington State over Idaho. As much as I'd like to see the Vandals maybe pull off the upset, I also want to see if they're going to bring back. I saw a tweet about the tradition of the losers walking home. So, will that be brought back this year? UC Davis over Utah Tech, and then San Diego over Cal Poly.
Perfect. And Mark, go ahead.
Okay. Start out Northern Colorado over Chadron State in a thriller. Oregon over Montana State. I think it'll be close, kind of like Oregon Idaho was last year. Oregon has a new quarterback, so we'll see. There could be some struggles early. James Madison over Weber. South Dakota State, even without a lot of the guys that they lost to WSU and they lost their quarterback to Iowa, I still pick them over Sac State. So much I'd like to see the Eagles win, but let's make them prove it, and I'll take Incarnate Word. Cal Poly to beat San Diego, BYU over Portland State. And I was trying to lean towards Southern Utah, but I think I'm going to stay with Idaho State. And since I figure Fritz picked them, that they must be pretty good. So we'll stay with Idaho State for another week. Arizona State over NAU, and that'll be curious to see how NAU can play with them. They should be able to. But sometimes those games get out of hand early, and then they end up like 49-7 or something like that. But NAU, pretty good team. They could give ASU some trouble. WSU in a close one over Idaho, and UC Davis winning at Utah Tech.
Great. And Mike, go ahead, and then I will finish.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll hop on the Chadron State College bandwagon here. Pick those guys. Oregon, just to me is no question though. Maybe Montana State will give them a few highlight plays or a couple moments of scare, but Oregon's going to take care of business there. I feel like James Madison over Weber State. I'm going to go with South Dakota State over Sac State. Maybe it'll be a close one, but I'd have to see a little more out of Sac State before I kind of hop on that hype train. And then, there's a bit of unknown with Eastern Washington. Looks like they're going to be starting a new quarterback this year. In the last few years haven't been too great for them. So I'm probably going to lean towards Incarnate Word for this game, but wouldn't be surprised if they maybe pulled an upset, like I said earlier, to capitalize on Incarnate Word's shortfall last week, and maybe this will be a hot start for them. Cal Poly over San Diego, BYU over Portland State. I'm going to continue riding with Idaho State. Despite the loss, I did like what I saw from them in certain aspects, and I think they can certainly build off of that going into this game. Arizona State over Northern Arizona, Washington State over Idaho, and UC Davis over Utah Tech.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll give my picks going forward this week. I'm going to take Oregon over Montana State. With South Dakota State beating Sac State, although I do think people will be tuning into that one in the second half. I think it will be closer. Incarnate Ward, I think, will bounce back this week versus Eastern. They could be vulnerable, but I see them just taking care of business at home. I think Northern Colorado will get a win on the board. Good for their program versus Chadron State. James Madison, I think, will beat Weber State. BYU will take care of business versus Portland State. I like San Diego at home over Cal Poly. Idaho State, as we just said, impressed last week, so I'm going to take them versus Southern Utah. And then I see Northern Colorado and Arizona State being a great game, just like Mark said. And I do think that it could be close, and I really did want to pick Northern Colorado, but I'm going to go with the Sun Devils. UC Davis going back to going to get a win versus Utah Tech. And I am going to take my only upset pick of the week. I'm going to take Idaho winning the Battle of the Palouse, shocking Cougar fans on Saturday night. But that is our picks this week, and we'll tally each week, and we'll see who at the end of the season is on top. I just want to thank my panel today for joining, and for everyone listening, feel free to drop some of your predictions this week or throughout the season in the comments, or even if you have any questions, we would love to discuss on any podcast we have. We will see you on next time on Big Sky Now. Thank you.
M&C Tire in Kalispell has been locally owned since 1979. From urban avenues to untamed trails, M&C Tire will help you conquer any terrain. Unleash the power within your ride. Stop into M&C Tire at 1271 North Meridian Road in Kalispell or mnctire.com. M&C Tire, wherever you go, we've got you covered.